In 326 BCE, Alexander's army finally hits the Punjab after years of conquest, dust in their mouths, iron in their armor, and silence in their tired boots. Cavalry mounts snort as monsoon clouds roll in, heavy and low, and the Hydaspes River rises like a wall of moving silver. Macedonian soldiers stare at the currents, sweat cooling on their brows, while distant villages and tree-lined banks glow in brief breaks of light. Spears clatter in the river wind, wet ropes creak. Even the horses hesitate, sensing the fight that waits beyond that crossing for them tonight. Alexander had conquered Persia, Egypt, and huge parts of Asia. Army after army had fallen before him. But here, across the Hydaspes, a ruler waited with no intention of surrendering. His name was Porus. No prompt received. On the far bank of the Hydaspes, King Porus tightens his grip on the moment. You can see him preparing his army, not for conquest like those huge Persian kings, but for survival in the Punjab he rules. Infantry line up close to the river, cavalry sits ready to surge, and the massive war elephants stand like living walls. Porus knows Alexander's goal: get across. He also knows what that means. If he lets the Macedonians charge straight in, they'll be staring at danger and exposed in open water, so he watches. Day after day, Porus tracks Alexander's movements, waiting for the first real mistake. Across the river, two armies stay locked in place. For days, neither side makes the move that could turn everything. The tension hangs heavy like dust before a storm breaks today. At last, Alexander pauses and looks toward the river, sensing the next step is coming. Alexander plays it cool on the riverbank. His soldiers shuffle up and down, splashing and shouting like they're gearing up to cross. Every few minutes, Porus's army reacts, watching, marching, bracing their spears. Porus starts to trust the rhythm. Any moment now, he thinks, ready to meet the same move again. Day after day, the same commotion echoes, and Porus marches his line back and forth, getting tired but convinced. Alexander just waits, letting Porus trust what he hears. But Alexander has a sneaky plan. A stormy night rolls in, thick rain, wind, and darkness that swallows sound. While Porus keeps expecting the usual show, Alexander quietly pulls a large chunk of troops upstream. No cheering, just silent feet and careful steps through mud and water. When the rain finally eases, Alexander's men form up, tighten their grip, and begin crossing the river for real. Suddenly, where Porus wasn't looking, right under him. That night, the river swelled like a thing. Rain pounded, wind whipped, and Alexander's men had to wade through cold, rushing water while lightning lit up the chaos. Their armor snagged, their legs slipped, and every step felt like survival. But the crossing plan was working. Cadence mattered. Cavalry splashed ahead, infantry followed in ranks, and at last they clawed onto the opposite bank. Across the dark, Porus finally got the message. Wait, Alexander already crossed? He could see the truth in the movement of troops gathering where he hadn't expected them. Porus didn't waste a second. News came in, and his commanders swung into action, forming lines and shifting supplies under thunder. He almost had no time to react because Alexander was already pushing forward. Wrong pause, and the river won't be the only enemy. Now both forces march toward the battlefield, storm still raging behind them. Picture the Battle of the Hydaspes like a movie set. Alexander's men clash with Porus's forces along the river. It's one of Alexander's toughest battles, and the battlefield won't play by his rules at all. Macedonian cavalry surge forward in charges, while Indian infantry pushes ahead step after step. Then the ground seems to rattle. Elephants lumber into the fight, towering and wild, knocking momentum off balance. You can feel the Macedonians' stress. They try to hold their lines, but the chaos keeps breaking their rhythm. The elephants don't just move through, they disrupt, forcing Alexander's soldiers into unfamiliar ground and unfamiliar fear. And Porus? He doesn't run. He stays on the battlefield, high atop his elephant, directing soldiers as the fighting swells. His army refuses to collapse, even when everything around them buckles. By the end, both sides are still locked in, breathless, battered, and unwilling to give up. Picture Alexander's army spreading across the battlefield. You see cavalry snapping into motion on both flanks, while infantry holds the line like a stubborn wall. Step by step, Alexander uses speed and coordination to wrap around Porus's men, surround, cut off momentum, and weaken their strength. At first, the Indian formation looks solid, shields up, ranks tight. Then the cavalry keeps pressing from the sides, and the infantry keeps pushing forward. Slowly, Porus's battle line starts to splinter, not in panic, but in strain. Porus doesn't bolt. You can almost hear his roar. No running, no surrender. His soldiers stay put, fighting hand to hand, refusing to give the space back. The battle becomes an endurance test, grueling, close, and exhausting. And yes, Alexander eventually wins, but it's far from effortless. You're watching endurance win over force until Porus's circle closes, nowhere to turn quickly. In the end, Porus is surrounded and captured. Slow the visuals, let the dust settle. After the fighting, the battlefield lies quiet, broken spears glinting in the fading light. In the center of it all, Porus is brought before Alexander. The two face each other at last, not as enemies across a map, but as people in the same air. Ancient sources spin a famous story. Alexander asks Porus how he should be treated. Porus replies, so the tale goes, that he wants to be treated like a king. Important note for your eyes: don't stage the dialogue as a confirmed transcript. We can't know the exact words, but the meaning comes through. Alexander respects Porus, and according to these accounts, Alexander restores him to power, turning conquest into a surprising act of recognition. It's the kind of moment historians remember because it shows respect can outlast victory. So when you picture that meeting, look for dignity, not just dominance today. Alexander had won the battle, and the map looked like it was opening eastward. But something was changing. In the monsoon haze, you can see exhausted soldiers trudging through endless Indian plains. Sweat mixes with dust, armor heavy as wet stone. For years they'd fought, marching thousands of miles, crossing mountains, smashing huge empires. Now they stare at the distant horizon and realize the orders don't stop. They're being asked to go even farther, deeper into heat and rain. As campfires dim, whispers spread, the supply lines are too long, the ground too wild. When commanders press on, they hesitate, then stop for good. Porus hadn't defeated Alexander. This time, the enemy isn't another king in disguise. It's the strain already in their bones. After that day, the march eastward slowed to a stubborn halt and morale collapsed. Sometimes the toughest opponent is the one riding right beside you, an exhausted army. Return to the Hydaspes River. Dawn spills over the water, and the battlefield feels quiet until you picture the clash. Porus did not defeat Alexander the Great. Alexander won the Battle of the Hydaspes. Pause. But Porus gave him one of the most difficult battles of his entire campaign. On one side, Porus's army presses forward, elephants looming like fortresses, dust rising around armor. On the other, Alexander's soldiers push across the riverbanks, determined and battered, holding their line as arrows and chaos crash together. Alexander's legend is built on victory after victory. Yet stories like Porus's remind you, conquering isn't the same as gliding through. It's hard, up close, and sometimes costly. Alexander conquered a huge slice of the ancient world, but on the banks of the Hydaspes, one king proved he could still be challenged.